Joining me now is Democratic Congressman from Illinois, Raja Krishnamurthy. He is the ranking member of the China Select Committee, and he and Chairman Mike Gallagher introduced that bill that could ban TikTok. So thank you so much for being here, Congressman.
Hey, thanks, Yamiche.
Now, it's still unclear when the Senate will take up your legislation, but I want to play for you what some senators are saying about your bill. Take a listen.
I understand people like TikTok. I would like to keep TikTok running, but not have our data used by the Communist Chinese Party.
How will you vote on this?
I don't know yet. I mean, I'm just being honest with you. I am definitely conflicted.
I'll tell you, there are a lot of questions my colleagues are asking, myself included. I haven't come to a final decision as to whether or not it should be banned.
So, Congressman, you just got a classified briefing this afternoon. What is your message to senators in particular who may be on the fence about this legislation?
Well, first of all, this is not a ban. What we're calling for is a divestment of TikTok by ByteDance, its owner, which is controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. And really, this isn't about TikTok, it's about ByteDance. And I think that what we're hearing is the president wants this authority to be able to balance the legitimate concerns of people who are on the platform, who should continue to enjoy the platform, with the legitimate national security concerns that have to do with our adversary, the CCP, and what it does in terms of its access to data, as well as in manipulation of the algorithm on the platform.
But, Congressman, if they don't divest, you will ban them. And to be clear, you also put a 6-month deadline on this. So explain how you square that with the idea that you put this ban, you put the consequence of the ban on the table. That was your decision.
Yeah, so basically they would be suspended from being able to operate until they comply with the law. This is very common. We have various laws that basically prevent excess ownership with regard to broadcast outlets, telecom companies, even railroads. And so what we're saying here is they need to comply with that particular law. They need to reduce their ownership to no more than a 20% stake in the company. And at that point, they would be in compliance.
I understand what your view on that. I want to also ask you about something about former President Trump. He said he believes that TikTok poses a national security risk. He initially supported banning it. I know you're saying it would be suspended, but he also is reversing course here, is flipping the script. How worried are you that President Trump and him not supporting this bill, that it could tank it in the 11th hour?
Well, I think he's been flip-flopping and then flipping. Just the other day, he gave a rambling interview with CNBC in which he said, you know, TikTok is absolutely a national security threat. I'm not really sure what exactly is motivating Donald Trump. Something tells me it has something to do with politics. Surprise, surprise. But the main point here is we have to do what is right. And what is right here is making sure that we ensure the divestment of the Chinese Communist Party and ByteDance with regard to TikTok.
Congressman, I also want to ask you about the constitutional issues that might be here. The ACLU has been critical of your bill, saying it would violate the First Amendment. They argue, quote, banning TikTok would have a profound implications for our constitutional right to free speech and free expression because millions of Americans rely on the app every day for information, communication, advocacy, and entertainment. So how would you respond to that argument? And are you concerned that this bill could end up being blocked by the courts because of those constitutional issues that the ACLU is bringing up?
No, there is no right. There's no First Amendment right to espionage. No, there's no First Amendment right to harm our national security. There are a number of cases, including Supreme Court cases, that basically say that even in a situation where, for instance, a bookstore is not in compliance with laws of general application, and even though obviously the authors and others who have the right to express themselves and the books contained in that bookstore should be able to sell them, if the bookstore is out of compliance, it's not allowed to operate until it's in compliance. And that's the situation here. Similarly, you know, broadcast outlets and other companies, we have foreign ownership limits or thresholds that can't be crossed. And I think that this is one of those situations where we don't want a foreign adversary's controlled social media app to basically harm our national security while we want people to continue to express themselves on the platform. I think that this law achieves the balance, and so people will be able to continue to do so. We have precedent here. There was Grindr, which is a LGBTQ app that was owned at one time by a Chinese company. Because we realized that the Chinese Communist Party had access to the sensitive personal data of LGBTQ members of the military and the government, we required divestment. That happened without a hitch. It happened quickly because Grindr was a valuable social media app, just as TikTok is, and there was no disruption of service, which is what we would expect here as well.
Well, Congressman, you talked about TikTok being a sort of bookstore. What if the president was in that bookstore? You have President Biden's campaign. As you know, they've joined TikTok. In fact, their campaign posted a new video today. Does that undermine in some ways your argument that this poses a national security threat if the president of the United States and his campaign is on it?
Well, I'm not going to tell the president how to campaign. I don't have TikTok on my own personal phone, and it's certainly banned from all government devices. But I think that everyone should use it very cautiously going forward. What I do know is what happened last week illustrates exactly why we need this particular bill. You may be aware that our particular bill passed out of the Energy and Commerce Committee, which is the committee of jurisdiction here, 50-0. That almost never happens, certainly not on the Energy and Commerce Committee. But the reason it happened is because TikTok, on the day of the vote, decided to use a push notification and a pop-up window on its app that required minor children, in order to be able to use the app, to call their member of Congress on the Energy and Commerce Committee to lobby against the bill in question. Well, when they called these offices, they flooded those offices with phone calls, by the way. These minor children basically asked the question, what is Congress and what is a congressman? And on top of that, in one case, they impersonated the child of one of the legislators. In another case, they actually called the congressman's office and said, I'm going to commit self-harm unless you turn on my TikTok. And so this illustrated in one example exactly why this particular legislation is necessary. Today, Christopher Wray at the Worldwide Threats hearing said in the open hearing, when I asked him about this particular example, he said he could not rule out that the CCP itself conducted this particular operation. So that is why we need this particular legislation.
We will certainly be watching this legislation. Thank you so much, Congressman, for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.